Hi there folks, welcome to Dunsy's Guitar World. And today's video is part one of an interview I did last week with a Mr. Ben Harding. Now, as well as being one of the good guys, Ben has played in two of my favourite bands. Here's a quick montage of his work. Ben was kind enough to give me a couple of hours of his time so I could grill him about his musical past, his early influences, his first guitars, and onto his recording career. Now, I've split this up into two. The first part will be the early days and then the Senseless Things. The second part will be into Three Colours Red and his current band, who may be from America or may not. So I do hope you enjoy it. A huge thank you to Ben for taking time out of his day to do this. Now, full disclosure here, I have known Ben for a little while. I think since 1991. So it was good to speak to him again. He's always good company. I hope you enjoy the video. As ever, folks, it's a privilege and a pleasure bringing you content on Dunsy's Guitar World. Just for now. So, how are you, Mr. Ben Harding?
I'm very well, thank you, Dunsy. Thanks for inviting me on. I mean, obviously, I love the show. I love your channel. And it seems like a great excuse to sit down and talk a load of bollocks about guitars, doesn't it?
That's why people of our age tune in to listen to people talking bollocks about guitars.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. So yeah. I have my comprehensive show notes on my phone. So
great.
So I always like to start with where did sort of music begin for you? Like when you were young, where did you first sort of hear something and you thought, you know, I like that. I like music. I like the melody, and then maybe like the guitar. Where was the first sort of thing that happened?
Well, my mum and dad both liked music. I mean, we had a proper stereo in the house, and they had decent record collections. Actually, my dad was a jazz pianist. I mean, he's still alive, but I don't think he plays much these days.
Uh-huh.
And very good as well. I mean, he's the kind of guy who'd go on holiday to Cuba, and then he would spend the entire time sitting in the bar, taking over the piano, trying to impress the locals. You know what I mean? And they love him. You know, they absolutely love him. But he was really good. Mum sang. She played the recorder as well. I mean, read music, all that stuff, to the extent where she had sheet music around the place. And she was more of a folky.
Right.
She liked classical music and she liked folk. So, but Dad also kind of picked up some of the rock records that were around at the time as well. Uh-huh. So I think the two LPs in that collection, which really kind of I really latched onto and kind of started to get something from, was In the Court of the Crimson King, King Crimson, from my dad's collection, and Steel Eye Span, Parcel of Rogues from my mum's collection.
Right.
That came out in '73, I think. So I would have been about 8. So, But I mean, the music was always there. Oh, and my dad also had the White Noise album, which is half the people from the Radiophonic Workshop writing mad hippie stuff, like seriously satanic stuff as well. Right. And that was, when you're a small child, that is a bit mind blowing.
I can imagine.
So that was kind of always there in the background, and so I kind of music, and also I was learning piano, for example, from an early age. Obviously, did the recorder at school. Learned the piano to I think grade 2. I didn't kind of carry that on because I didn't really like Mrs. Shufflebotham, who was who was my teacher in Newcastle under Lyme.
I hope we don't get sued. Hope we don't get sued here.
Well, she was old then. She's long gone. Don't worry. And then I moved on to the flute, and I kind of got pretty good at the flute, and had lessons again, got grades, briefly joined an orchestra,
Uh-huh.
but I've never employed it in anger, really. You know,
It's never been featured on a recording.
certainly not. No, no.
When did the first guitar, the electric guitar, come into your life?
I was about 13, I think.
Mhm.
In fact, the first electric instrument that came into my life was a bass, and it was a fretless bass. It was a frameless, fretless bass. This is my dad trying to push me down that route. You know,
Right.
he was a big Joni Mitchell fan, and of course that was Coyote era.
Is
So
it Jacko that plays on that?
Jaco Pastorius on the fretless bass, and I did love that album. You know, but. And my dad wanted me to play with him, which was very sweet. And so he kind of bought this fretless bass, which wasn't originally fretless. The previous owner had defretted it, and a Sound City amp and cab, and it was one of those proper Sound City, heavy as anything, you know, with the primary colours on the knobs. But it wasn't. I don't think it was a bass amp. I think it was actually a guitar amp. So I wish I still had that as well, because it was it sounded immense. So yeah, I kind of fooled around with bass for about 6 months, but I was getting into punk at the age of 13, and you know, I'd heard Stiff Little Fingers, and I thought, how hard can that be, you know? And my dad had taught me the basics. He taught me 3 chords basically on a nylon classical guitar, which is E, A, and D, like a diminished D kind of thing, or D7th. So that's all I had to start with. But from somewhere, and I don't remember where, I got a really awful red Strat copy. The action was about a mile high, and you know, and the intonation was all over the place. But I tell you what, I plugged that into. I think the Sound City was gone by this time. I plugged it into one of those tiny little 5-watt Vox amps that you could get at the time, and I tell you what, I took 2 of those back to the shop because I blew them up within a few days. Just playing top volume. But I got the bug, and I soon traded up to a Jedson Les Paul Black Beauty kind of copy.
Yeah, you sent me a photograph of that, so I'll put that in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Which was, I thought that was a good guitar. You know, that really wasn't bad. It was. I found out kind of looking for the photo of it. I found out that it was. I always thought it was Canadian, but it's not. It's a Japanese copy. So you know, I got that for something stupid, 50 quid, something like that. You know, and that was really kind of fine for a while. I think did I send you the photo of me playing it with my little bowly haircut? And
yes, you did.
In the jumper with my grandma had knitted me, you know. So yeah, so that was me basically in my bedroom for a while, and it was after I joined. I mean, I joined a band with a bunch of Cornish guys called the Rick Burners. And at this point, I'd got more into heavy and hard rock kind of thing. So from somewhere, again, I can't remember where it came from, but I got the Ibanez 2663 artist, 2663, which is the precursor of the Iceman. Of course, that would have been from about 1972 or 73. I think they only made them for a year or so. And that was a great leap forward. Because that was a proper guitar. with the fastest neck I've ever played to this day. Yeah, and skinniest as well.
Yeah.
So, and it sounded amazing. So it just looked a little bit ridiculous, and you had to kind of, you had to work that guitar. You had to kind of justify holding it, if you know what I mean.
You almost have to look like you have to have Paul Stanley's hair to
Exactly.
sort of rock that, and big heels.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I used that in that band. We split up after the drummer had an unfortunate incident at a gig at the Tunnel Club in Greenwich, where he, just before the gig started, he stubbed his cigarette out in an ashtray into which the remnants of a flash pot had been poured by the previous evening's heavy metal band. So massive green flash, and poor old Gary stumbles out from behind the kit with half the skin on his arm hanging off. It was a really awful accident. Yeah. But I was so hyped for the gig. The first thing I said was, "Can we do it without Gary?" And I feel so awful about that to this day. And the answer was, of course, no, we fucking can't do it without Gary.
The show must go on, although sometimes maybe not.
Yes, well, exactly. But I was, oh God, man. But I've always been like that. I've always been so absolutely focused on the gig, you know. So anyway, that band split up, and then I was about 21 by this point, and in my brother's circle of friends, he's 3 years younger than me, all based around kind of Richmond College in southwest London. He told me, he was in a band called the Milk Monitors at the time.
Yeah.
And he told me that there was a bunch of kids who were looking for a guitarist, and would I be interested? And yes, I really would. So I joined Mark and Morgan and Cass, and they already were Senseless Things.
So then you start rehearsing with them, and then when did the first gigs happen with that?
Almost immediately. Yeah, we were just all about playing. So we were writing and playing. I mean, obviously they were still at school, so you know, but not really paying much attention to it, if I'm perfectly honest. And I was just working dead-end jobs to kind of get from one rehearsal to the next. And I had a checkbook. I suspect the fact that I had a checkbook was the main reason I was in the band, you know. But I hope I proved my worth as well. But no, we started gigging straight away, and we didn't stop. And Mark had a real knack for it, actually. I mean, he was so brilliant at going out and pimping the band, basically, kind of going out and saying, you know, and kind of putting little tours together. We mostly played in and around London, mostly southwest London, for the first kind of 6 months to a year. But then the kind of scene started to develop, and we kind of got in touch with people like Wiz from Mega City 4, who showed us the way. And, you know, kind of gave us all of the info. It was like the modern, it was like the internet in those days.
Yeah, very much.
Where all the info was. And so they were a few months ahead of us in terms of going out and playing places outside London. So we just got all the contact details, and Mark would just spend all the time calling people up and, you know, kind of arranging little interviews with fanzines and stuff like that. But it was very, very, very grassroots. And it kind of became clear pretty quickly that there was a bunch of bands like us who were out to do it in a kind of DIY style, and, you know, were determined to kind of build a little scene all of our own.
Very much so.
And that's what happened. So, yeah.
What guitar were you using in those early gigs then?
Well, the earliest gigs I was using the Ibanez, the
Did you,
2663. I mean, there's a couple of shots I think I sent you of me looking a bit kind of Hanoi Rocks with the
yeah.
black dyed hair and a cap on and some silly trousers and a skull and crossbones t-shirt,
Uh-huh.
cut off sleeves, playing the 2663. And that was with Senseless Things downstairs at the Clarendon.
That's funny,
that was our second home. The second home was downstairs at the Clarendon. We could always get a gig there, you know, and our audience really started building at that point.
When I saw that photograph, like I didn't realise of the Senseless Things. I thought you were maybe you'd ventured into some kind of Hanoi Rocks kind of thing. I didn't realise you turned up at the indie show with your pointy guitar.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, yeah. But it kind of just was what it was. But no, that's you can see Mark and Morgan in other photos from the same gig, and Cass actually. But yeah, no, we would play downstairs at the Clarendon all the time with the Milk Monitors, with the Hypnotics, you know, that kind of cadre of bands who were really around West London at the time. And that was great. And upstairs at the Clarendon, of course, you had Club Foot, so you had all the psychobilly stuff going on, and snake biting black flowing down the gutters, you know. And loads of goth gigs, you know, and you had bands like Big Black playing in the mid 80s, and you know, just so much good stuff. So that's really where it kind of got started snowballing. But yeah, I was using the Ibanez at that point. I pretty soon graduated onto the Gibson Spirit because I thought I did think I want something a little bit more punk rock, you know. And I didn't really know much about guitars, you know, and I've always been what you might call an enthusiastic amateur as opposed to a pro,
right?
Kind of thing. So I didn't have in-depth knowledge, if you know what I mean. But I knew Gibson was a good brand, kind of, you know, the top of the heap.
Yeah.
But this was very much entry level, you know.
Are they a bolt on neck?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. I think some models were and some weren't. I don't think mine was.
I've never seen one in the flesh. The only time I've seen one is in the Senseless Things video.
Yeah. I think we could probably easily find out by, you know, having a look on Reverb or something. But mine is one of quite a few variations on the Gibson Spirit theme. You know, there were kind of posher models with two pickups and a bit of kind of piping around the side and, you know, stuff like that. Mine was pretty much the kind of entry level model, which was just the one. I think it was, if it wasn't a DiMarzio Super Distortion, or whatever you call it, it was very close to one of those. You know what I mean? Kind of proper stock humbucker from the mid 80s.
Yeah. And what amp were you using a Marshall at that point?
Really good question. Possibly. You know, I don't. Again, my recollection is so awful. I think at that stage it might really have been a case of using whatever was there. You know, kind of just phoning up to the headliners and just saying, "Can I use your amp?" And if you didn't have one with you, then likelihood is that they'd say yes. You know, because you're not going to be able to kind of just track one down. But no, what was I using? I mean, I think I was still using little combo amps. By this point, I think we'd graduated to rehearsing at Survival Studios in Acton, and that was wall-to-wall Marshall stacks and JCM 800s. So, you know, that was the ideal. But, you know, we didn't make enough money to buy gear, really.
Mm.
The only spending spree we ever went on was when we got signed to Epic in the later years.
Uh-huh.
But you do kind of find ways and means of kind of gradually upgrading your stuff. You know what I mean?
You do. We still do.
Yeah. But it did also mean that I got really good at getting the best possible sound I could out of a variety of amps. You know, and
Yeah.
we did have a Marshall, which was one of those kind of thin ones, one of the transistor Marshalls from the
Yeah.
70s,
Mm-hmm.
and we had one of them. But yeah, I mean, pretty soon I got round to getting a JCM 800 stack, half stack.
I mean, I think what you said there, you get used to getting a good sound out of any amp. I mean, that's a skill in itself. And in the band I'm in, like I rarely take an amp.
Yeah.
I just use whatever's there, and you can get your sound within
Yeah.
within 5 minutes, and it's
Yeah,
a skill
particularly with
set.
Yeah, absolutely, particularly with a couple of pedals.
So when does the first Senseless Things record come out?
The first record we put out was the Up and Coming EP.
Right.
We were basically approached by a chap called Pete, who had a little bit of money, and he was interested in managing us and putting a record out. So he basically paid to create Way Cool Records,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is our own label. And as far as I recall, and I think I'm right, Up and Coming was the first kind of 12-inch with, I think, 6 songs on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then fairly shortly after that, we recorded the first 7-inch, which was Girlfriend Back with Standing in the Rain.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the one that kind of started to get a bit of proper attention, you know.
Yeah.
We had the artwork on that. That was by Steve Diggle's brother.
Was it?
Yeah, it was. Because Steve Diggle was a bit of a fan. We'd played a gig with him with Flag of Convenience at the George Roby, the Sir George Roby, that absolute stinking piss hole in North London. But very affectionate. I've got very affectionate memories of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was our first foray into the indie charts as well. I think Girlfriend Standing in the Rain. Being mentioned in the turn-ons, so journalists' kind of top 10 new thingies that week. So started to get a bit more attention, and we were getting live reviews as well. So it was all kind of starting to happen. And about the same time, we had our first John Peel session as well.
Right.
So, which was obviously the taking off point, because the whole country has heard of you.
Yeah. So then the gigs start getting more outside of London at that point as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to the extent that in 1989, 88, 89, we were doing about 250 gigs a year. So I know, right? But we basically spent all of our time in the back of a van, sleeping on people's floors, and just kind of life on the road. Simple as that. Us and our small crew, just doing just that, and it's the only way to do it, I think. Or it felt like the only way to do it, because you're learning your craft as you go, but we were still on the days off, we were in the rehearsal studio writing songs. So Mark, we'd learn 2 new songs a night, play them the next day.
It's crazy, eh? Crazy.
Yeah.
Were you like playing bigger venues with like supporting bigger bands as well, like American touring bands at that point?
Not American ones so much. We did, we managed to start snagging, particularly after the Peel session, we managed to start snagging some really decent supports at places like the Astoria. Like we supported Bad Brains, and But the big one for us, I think, was when the Buzzcocks reformed.
Right.
I think Steve Diggle might have had a hand in that, and it was us, then the Family Cat, and Buzzcocks,
Family
and
cat.
that was and that was our first proper tour. You know, we were in a van, Buzzcocks were in a bus. Our rider was half a slab of those little tins of Skull.
Oh yeah.
And food-wise, we were left to fend for ourselves. So we were literally lean, mean, and hungry.
Yeah.
Oh, and another excellent tour we went on was the Dickies.
Did you do the
came
Dickies?
over. Yep, and we supported them up and down from Scotland down to London. That was great.
Where did they play? Did they play the Carlton Studios in Edinburgh at that point?
Something like that, I think so. Yeah. So we would have been on the bill for that. And everyone was kind of on tenterhooks, wondering if Leonard was going to fall off the wagon. You
know.
Right. So that was fun. They were great. What a good band.
Yeah. Good fun.
Still are,
was this touring? Was Postcard CV out at this point? Was this touring that?
Now you're asking. My chronology is not going to be that great. Let's just admit to that fact now. You know.
Okay. I'll be able to fact check you on the internet.
Yeah. No. Do it. Yeah. Do it. Correct me. But Postcard CV kind of came along fairly soon after Girlfriend stroke Standing in the Rain, because it was inevitable we'd need to get an LP out, and of course we had all the songs. We've been touring for a couple of years, so yeah, into Southern Studios with Harvey Birrell at the controls, and it was basically recorded and mixed in a day, so 12 songs.
Good.
So yeah, just get in, play your asses off, and then I think it all wound up at 6 a.m. and we were on deadline because there was another band coming in the next day. So I was desperately trying to get some sleep under the control board. It was exhausting.
Did he stay on and record the next band that was coming in, or did he go home?
That I don't know, but I suspect he didn't. Poor bloke, he was so frazzled by the end of it, you know. But it turned out all right, you know. I think there's something to be said for doing stuff by the tip of your fingernails. You know?
I mean, I find that these days, like when I'm doing digital recording at home, there's so many options to keep redoing stuff, and I'm ending up redoing stuff that I probably don't need to redo. And when I do it, I think if I was in a studio, that would be perfectly fine. Nobody would notice that.
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, my current band, we try to emulate those good old days kind of thing, and record live as much as we can, overdub guitar solos and vocals, and that's kind of pretty much it, you know. And most of the solos, I've not settled on what the solo is. I'll just do it on the fly and keep the bits that work and slot in bits that work between the bits that worked, you know. Exactly. It's the way I've always done that, and then just learn the solo thereafter. So that it works perfectly well. I mean, that's how the solo on Too Much Kissing worked. It's how most of the solos on my Three Colors Red stuff were recorded. You know.
So after Postcard CV, then the first of two men, do you move to Epic at that point for the second album?
Yeah, that's right. That was right. Let's sign to a major, you know. So I mean, it had its upsides and its downsides. Obviously, there was money to support us in touring. There was a bit more heft in terms of getting us onto decent tours, but we could afford things like hotels. I say we could afford, you know, we were going to be paying for it in the long run.
Yeah, very much so.
But yeah, no, we lived the life of Riley for a bit. I mean, it's not like we were on any decent money ourselves. I mean, I think I was on something stupid like 100 quid a week for about 5 years, you know.
Crazy. Eh?
But I wanted for nothing because, you know, I had enough income to cover my very small mortgage. And, you know, and the rest of it was just being out. I was out with the band, either recording or touring. So, you know, I got fed. I got fed most days.
Yeah,
But also they took us out on a equipment spending spree.
I was going to ask, what did you upgrade to?
A JCM 900
Ooh.
with just one 4x. I think it was just the one. One was it 1960 4x12 or a 1980, one of the two. Anyway,
Yeah.
so there was that, and also my Gibson Les Paul. So I thought, right, time to really go for the zenith, the acme here. And so yeah, I bought 1992 Gibson Les Paul standard with a really nice bird's eye maple finish. And I had that ever since until I sold it last year.
Oh.
So yeah, I mean, reason for that is I wasn't playing it. And it was just sitting in the case. It was a case queen. And I wanted different guitars, and I got a pretty good price from a mate for it. I mean, he's sold it on since, but he did ask me first. He gave me the opportunity to buy it back at a loss to him, which I was really appreciative of. But I thought, no, I've just got to move on, you know, and what am I going to do with it? I can't use it in a gig, you know. And also, that had, I mean, I'd only had that guitar a matter of days when someone who shall remain nameless, Cass, knocked it off its stand in the recording studio and bust the headstock off it. Had that repaired. It was fine. Until it wasn't. And it wasn't when we flew to the States for our first proper American tour. And yeah, that really did not appreciate being in the hold or being chucked about by a few, you know, heavy-handed airline staff or airport staff. So, first job, having arrived in New York, was to go to Manny's, and get it repaired, which we did, and it was repaired within the day, and it's been solid ever since. But that was a proper fix.
Brilliant. You know? So, how long were you in America at that point for, and was it mostly on the sort of East Coast, or was it the whole sort of country?
2.5 months. Yeah, we were supporting Blur.
All right, right.
This was, I think, was it the Leisure tour, basically the Leisure era? So before they reinvented themselves, and that tour was really the catalyst for Blur to take stock, because it almost killed them. I mean, as a band, almost finished it. No, we started off in Trenton, New Jersey, and basically went up the east side, a little bit into Canada, across the top, not stopping in places like North Dakota or Montana, but just driving through, which is great, apart from almost getting shot a couple of times. And then over to Vancouver, you know, Washington State, Seattle, down the West Coast, which was just fantastic, just driving down the West Coast Highway. And then across the bottom, and, you know, kind of made our way through New Mexico into, you know, whatchamacallit, Louisiana, Georgia, down to through Texas down to Florida and back up. By which point, Blur had really had enough, and they cancelled like the last 3 or 4 gigs on that. So we ended up not playing South Carolina, North Carolina, etc. on the way back up.
Right.
But we had another couple of gigs lined up, so we hung around long enough to do those, like including playing at CBGB in New York.
Brilliant. What size venues were Blur playing at that point then?
They were playing pretty decent venues. They would be 4,000 to 5,000. Some of them, small. Some were smaller, depending on whereabouts you were and what kind of audience you might get. I mean, for example, we played in New Orleans, and we played at Tipitina's, which is not very big, but is very, very famous. And you know, they did not have a clue what to make of us. I'll tell you that much.
I was going to ask. I mean, how did the Blur audience, when you guys came on and like, you know, 100 miles per hour, how were the audience coping?
Oh, they loved it. No, they absolutely loved it. I mean, they were all Anglophiles anyway. They all loved English music, and a lot of them had heard of us, you know. And Epic were doing a pretty good job of pushing radio play and what have you. So, you know, we kind of there was some knowledge. There were quite a lot of kids who were coming specifically to see us. We got quite a lot of college radio play. So we were to an extent a known quantity. But we didn't have any of the pressure that Blur did, because we'd be off stage by 9 o'clock. So and there was a bunch of kids out there who loved English people and English music. So we would have a great time drinking with the fans and having a really excellent time. Whereas Blur would come off stage and there'd be fuck all happening, and they'd be bless them. I just think they found it really, really tough, you know.
And the Les Paul held steady for the whole 2.5 months.
Yeah, absolutely, it did. But on the whole, I was mostly using we've missed out a section guitar-wise. I was mostly using the Slip 50, which is this one.
I've seen that guitar a few times.
I'm sure you have. That's a Levinson Blade guitar. The story with this. Just to interject there, I'm sure I watched a video from maybe Phoenix. Was Mark playing that?
Yeah. For a song?
Yeah.
I thought that.
Yeah. Because I would have been playing a Les Paul, and he would have broken a string on his Les Paul Junior, and he would frequently pick up one of my blades because I had two.
Right.
And he'd frequently pick up one of them to kind of carry on the gig.
He looked funny playing it. I was just like, is he playing a Telecaster?
Oh. Well, so when we started out, Mark had the most fantastic Telecaster thin line in that kind of blonde wood, and he played that for a long time. He had that for a long time, but live and recording, he preferred the Les Paul Juniors. So
So tell us the story behind this fantastic guitar.
Well, this fantastic guitar, it goes back to the Gibson Spirit, actually, because we were about to go over to Japan for our first Japanese tour. And at the last gig before we left, I think the Gibson Spirit fell off its stand, or I dropped it, or the strap came off, and it went head first to the floor, and snapped off a chunk of wood, which had one of the tuning pegs on it. I was freaking out because I had less than 24 hours before I had to get on a plane and go to Japan. And kid comes up to me at the gig and said, "I've got a guitar that you can have if you want to swap." And I said, "Well, yeah, but this one's broken." And he went, "No, I don't mind. It's very cool." And it was great. It was all stick it up and all the rest of it, And he had a Squier Telecaster kind of kind of ice cream vanilla, basically, colour. So we swapped, and off I went to Japan with this kind of not amazing Telecaster, which wasn't really my sound, because it had single core pickups, and I was used to quite a meaty demise style humbucker. So, but I kind of, persevered with it, just kind of ramped up the gain a bit and, fattened up the tone a bit on the amp. That was okay, But after the, we appeared on basically the local equivalent of Japan's Got Talent, basically. We appeared on a channel. The record company had arranged for us to appear on a Opportunity Knocks kind of TV program. What we didn't realize was that this was the equivalent of Opportunity Knocks. Like, everybody in Japan watched it. Millions and millions of people watched it. So next morning, Cass and Morgan went out to buy some caffeine chewing gum or whatever they were going to do. And of course, they're very distinctive. You're not going to miss those kind of blonde, spiky heads.
No.
Everywhere they went, people recognized them. It was just like, Ikaten, which was the name of the show. It was like, and that was a bit woo. And then we had to double the capacity of the venues we were booked to play at, because all of a sudden the tickets sold out. Yeah, that was master stroke by the record company. Anywho, after one of these gigs, after one of the earliest of those gigs, chap came up to me after the show and introduced himself via our interpreter, Patricia. And turns out this is a guy called Yachi Tanaka. He's who you've probably not heard of, but he's a big deal in Japan. He's a very famous Japanese guitarist. And anyway, I always loved meeting other guitarists and kind of, just sitting down, talking, having a bit of a jam, whatever. Anyway, he invited me to his place just for a chat and some tea and what have you. So I went over to his tiny little apartment, and we sat and talked as best we could, considering he couldn't speak any English and I didn't have any Japanese. But we somehow managed to make ourselves kind of understood. And he gave me this to play. And I just went, wow, that's really nice. And I think in the original blades, this bridge pickup was quite hot, and it's got an active circuit in it as well.
Oh, right.
Take that off. I mean, you've got a little crosshead screwdriver. You can adjust bass treble volume, basically, and it's got a little bit of active power in it. And so it gave me the bollocks I needed, but in a really nice Telecaster shape with a great color. I mean, what color even is it? I don't know. So there I was playing away on this thing, and he basically was saying, "Do you like it?" And I said, "Yeah, I love it." And he said, "You can have it." And I went, "What?" Okay, really? And he said, "Yeah. No, I mean it. I don't know if this is kind of part of some Japanese hospitality thing that I wasn't really aware of." He did have loads of guitars, to be fair. And not only that, but he said, "And I'll contact Levinson and ask if would you like to be would you like a sponsorship deal?" Yeah,
brilliant.
And well, yeah, that sounds good. So yeah, next thing you know, I got a call from Levinson in the UK and said Yachi Tanaka's been in touch and recommended that we offer you an endorsement deal. So I went, fine. And they sent me another one, same color, but this one here is a prototype.
Right.
Where's the? Yeah, it hasn't even got a. It actually does not have. Oh no, it does. Serial number 60042. But it is basically a prototype. Because the next one I got, the new one, it wasn't quite as special. This one's really special for some reason. It just feels right. So yeah, I mean the other one was it was literally just a spare, and that was the one that Mark ended up using a lot of the time.
Right. So it's been on top of the pops and the word.
It has, yes, absolutely, and all around the States, and yeah, Japan again, yeah, and everywhere.
Nice one.
And also that's what you hear on the First of Too Many as well.
Is it? So
yeah.
When the last Senseless Things album, when's that? The
last Senseless Things album would have been 94, I think. Taking Care of Business.
Yeah. I've got like the guitar sound, like I sent you that cover the other day. The guitar sound, the guitar sound on the album is just a monster rock sound. It's so good.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think obviously I was using the Les Paul for most of that, and also we were hiring guitars in too. I mean, I definitely used a PRS at some point on that.
Right.
I mean, I was doing interviews with Guitarist magazine at the time, and they just throw random guitars at you that they had to promote, I think, and kind of got you to say what you thought of them. But I was quite taken with the PRS because I hadn't had anything with a whammy bar before, and particularly not a real proper dive bomber either. Yeah, I've been a hardtail guitar player like most of my career, So 1995 it came out.
1995. Did you do much touring to promote that album as well?
Yeah, but you know what? The crowds had really fallen off. So we were getting booked into 400-500 capacity venues, whereas a year or two before there'd be 2,000 plus capacity. So the audience fell off a cliff. Thanks Nirvana, once the grunge killed Senseless Things at the end of the day. No matter how much we tried to keep up with it, And we loved these bands. We thought that we knew about Sub Pop before any fucker else did. I had a copy of Nevermind months before most people did because we had the same publicist. So I had a cassette of it. It was great.
It's a strange thing as well. I mean, you could see in Nirvana, like the whole hair metal scene is so different from that. You can see Nirvana killing that, but given how the Senseless Thing sounded, I mean, it's not a million miles away from the same style of sort of music.
Yeah, but the thing was that while we regarded that as a kind of progression from pop punk to something a bit more serious and a bit heavier, and we felt that was a natural progression for us. That's not how people saw it or experienced it outside our little gang. I think the perception was that we were trying to ride the coattails, and it's a perfectly justifiable kind of. You can see why it's a perfectly reasonable stance to take. You can see why people would think that. That isn't what we were doing.
No.
But we always wore our influences on our sleeves. Some of our little nicks from the Replacements and what have you. We've always been really honest about the bands we love, and we've allowed them to kind of creep into what we do always. And that happened with Nirvana and the rest of the grunge stuff as well. So that's what music sounded like at that time. And I can be sanguine about it now, but it's like when you're in your mid-20s and this thing which you kind of thought was going to go on for for ages, just kind of grinds to a halt, and it's like okay. And then Mark didn't come back from Japan to do
Oh,
Phoenix Festival.
did he stay with the Wild Hearts?
No, I mean no. That was they had to cancel the gig because he didn't come back either. I mean that was
Right.
that was the crossover point. It was already clear. We knew we were splitting up, although we never said we split up. Actually, we were just on a 30-year hiatus.
All right.
But you know, Mark had already kind of arranged his move into the Wild Hearts, and was doing and been on Top of the Pops once or twice with them doing Geordie in Wonderland. You know,
That's right.
so that was kind of happening at the same time. But we had contractual obligations. We had a few gigs that we were still supposed to do.
Uh-huh.
And frankly, I wanted to do them because it would have been a nice goodbye, you know.
Yeah.
But no, I got a postcard from Mark just saying I'm not coming back.
Having a good time.
Fine, yeah, I suppose. You know, I can send you a photo of that as well. But yeah, I just discovered it again the other day.
That's crazy.
No,
So
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what that was all about, but it was what it was. You know.
So that was what, 96, going into 96.
I think I don't recall. I think that was it 96? Possibly, or was it 95? Because there was a bit of time between Senseless Things ending and Three Colours Red starting up properly.